So, when you see a conflict just sort of erupt out of nowhere,
Right.
right?
Yeah, constantly.
Like whether it's a couple having an absolute meltdown at the grocery store or two nations launching artillery at each other, our immediate impulse is always to act like a detective.
Right, we want to solve it.
Exactly. We want to unravel this massive, knotted ball of yarn. We look for the thread of who threw the first punch or, who has the historical claim or even just who said the more offensive thing.
We expend an incredible amount of mental energy trying to understand the why of the fight, don't we?
We really do. And we do it so that we can assign moral blame to one side and, well, grant moral victory to the other.
It's just an incredibly ingrained human reflex. I mean, we want to weigh the grievances. We want to put all the facts on a scale and determine who is justified.
Yeah.
There is this deep-seated belief that inside every conflict, if you just dig deep enough, you will find a quote-unquote right side and a wrong side.
And that is exactly what our source material today completely dismantles.
Completely tears it apart.
What if the sheer fact that a brutal fight is happening at all tells you everything you actually need to know about the entities involved?
Right.
Today, we are going on a deep dive into a framework that is honestly designed to completely rewire how you view every argument, every boardroom clash, and every war you will ever encounter.
It's a big promise, but the text really delivers.
It does. We are looking at a translated essay by a writer named Schriffing. It's dated March 23, 2021, and I mean, the title alone is a massive provocation.
Oh, absolutely.
It is called, and I quote, "Conflicts occur between barbarism and between barbarism and civilization."
What's fascinating here is how the title just lays the entire thesis bare right from the start.
Yeah, no beating around the bush.
None at all. It strips away all those subjective, messy details we usually obsess over. It takes the politics, the history, the personal betrayals, and essentially renders them irrelevant for the purpose of diagnosis.
Okay, let's unpack this because the central premise of Shuo Feng's essay is basically a mathematical absolute. If a conflict is happening, whether it's between two people, two tribes, or two countries, it is impossible for both sides to be civilized.
Impossible.
The text states, without any caveat whatsoever, that civilized parties simply never fight each other.
And this is such a profound shift in perspective because it treats conflict as a symptom.
Like a medical symptom.
Exactly. I mean, in medicine, if you see a specific symptom, it tells you the exact nature of the disease, regardless of what the patient claims they ate for dinner last night.
Right, the symptom doesn't lie.
Exactly. Shuifeng is arguing that conflict is the behavioral symptom of barbarism. The presence of the clash itself allows you to diagnose the true nature of the people fighting. You basically get to bypass all their self-righteous shouting.
I'm having a really hard time accepting this absolute never, though.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
It really is. And I imagine you listening to this right now might be feeling that exact same pushback. It just feels way too rigid.
Sure.
Like, let's say you have two coworkers. They're both genuinely trying to launch a project successfully.
Okay.
And they clash over the logistics because both of them truly believe they are following the best practices of their industry. Does this essay really claim that just because they have a logistical friction point, they are barbaric?
Well,
Doesn't progress sometimes require a clash?
that distinction right there between a localized disagreement and a true systemic conflict is vital. And the text actually addresses this nuance when you look at the specific phrasing.
Okay, so there is a distinction.
Yes. Shuifeng isn't talking about two people politely disagreeing over a spreadsheet and then finding a solution. The essay draws its conclusion based on long-term patterns of behavior.
Interesting.
There's a line we really need to highlight here. It says, "From this, we can draw the conclusion that those who often clash with other people must be barbarians and are definitely not civilized people."
The word often carries a lot of weight there.
It carries all the weight. The recurring nature of the friction is the diagnostic trigger.
Ah, I see.
If those two coworkers sit down, talk through their differing methodologies, figure out the misunderstanding, and move forward, they are demonstrating the mechanics of civilization.
Because the friction is resolved.
Right. But if they're constantly clashing week after week, project after project, and each is perennially convinced that they are the sole bearer of the truth while the other is a complete disaster.
Then the diagnostic tool kicks in.
Impressed. Because at that point, the fight is no longer about the spreadsheet.
Or the project. It's about them.
Exactly. The blame shifts entirely from the external issue being fought over directly onto the internal character of the people fighting. If a conflict is perpetual, the issue isn't the actual problem.
Their internal nature is the problem.
Yes, their inability to coexist without friction.
So if Treth is right, it means every time we say they started it or they just won't listen to reason, we are actually, well, we're ignoring our own nature. If someone finds themselves in a constant state of argument with their neighbors, their family, their colleagues, this text suggests they are the common denominator. The constant conflict is the literal proof of their own barbarism.
It completely removes the shield of justification. You can no longer hide behind the excuse of having a, quote, righteous cause if your method of interacting with the world is perpetual warfare.
Wow. Okay, so if we accept that premise, that there are no two civilized parties in a fight, and that at least one party in the room has to be a barbarian, it brings up a massive question of observation.
How to spot them.
Yeah. If we are watching a conflict from the outside, how do we know if we are looking at one barbarian fighting a civilized person or two barbarians destroying each other? Like, is there a visible tell?
There is. Shufeng provides a remarkably clear two-tiered scale for diagnosing the exact makeup of the combatants.
A rubric for fighting.
Exactly. And it's based entirely on the cruelty and the severity of the conflict itself.
Right. So the first tier the text lays out is the absolute extreme. It states that if a fight between two parties is extremely brutal, like if they are inflicting massive, devastating harm upon each other, it is universally a conflict between barbarism and barbarism.
Always.
There is no civilized entity involved at all in that scenario.
Think about the underlying mechanism of that extreme brutality. Like, why does it escalate to that point?
Because nobody is stopping it.
Right. Because in a clash between two barbarians, there is simply no braking mechanism. You have two entities whose fundamental nature is to consume, control, and dominate.
Yeah.
Neither side possesses the internal architecture required to de-escalate, so the violence simply creates a feedback loop of destruction.
So whether you are observing a scorched earth divorce where both parties are trying to ruin each other financially and emotionally, or a geopolitical war with catastrophic casualties.
The extreme cruelty is the undeniable signature. You don't need to read their political manifestos. The brutality itself is the proof that neither side is civilized.
That makes the second tier incredibly fascinating to me. Because the text says that if the fighting is less cruel, if we see occasional compromises and, temporary truces, but the macro level fighting generally continues long term, then we are looking at a conflict between barbarism and civilization.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that second scenario introduces the braking mechanism. It introduces the fingerprint of the civilized party.
A compromise. That's the fingerprint.
Yes. The civilized party is fundamentally opposed to the nature of the conflict. Their instinct is to cool things down, to offer the olive branch, to try and find a middle ground. But because they are locked in a dynamic with a barbarian and an entity that absolutely does not want a middle ground, but wants total control, the peace cannot hold.
It is so much like watching someone try to extinguish a forest fire with a garden hose.
That's a great way to put it.
The fire's only nature is to consume everything it touches, right?
Yeah.
The civilization cools down a specific area, creating a temporary lull. Exactly. But because the fire hasn't changed its nature, the moment the water stops flowing, the fire just surges forward again.
Yep.
The civilized party tries to pull back and compromise. The barbarian exploits that pause to push forward, and the whole cycle just continues.
That dynamic is exactly why the conflict drags on, but never quite reaches the apocalyptic brutality of the first tier.
Because one side is holding back.
Right. The very presence of those cooling moments, those temporary truces, proves that one side is actively fighting against the escalation of the conflict itself.
We are talking about these entities, barbarians and civilization, almost like they're forces of nature.
They do act like it.
But Safem is very specific about the behavioral DNA that makes up these forces, right? The essay moves from looking at the severity of the fight from the outside to really dissecting the internal psychology of the participants.
The text provides a very specific checklist of actions that define this so-called barbarians. And it is crucial to look at why these specific actions are chosen.
Let's list them out. The essay defines barbarism by these traits. Not keeping promises, not following rules, not fulfilling contracts, always wanting to take advantage of the other party, always wanting to control the other party, and always wanting to take the other party's possessions.
It's a stark list.
It really is. And when I first read that, not fulfilling contracts felt like a strangely mundane business complaint to place right next to the word barbarism.
I can see that.
Like, What is the deeper connection there?
Well, I think the deeper connection is the concept of boundary violation. Think about what a promise, a rule, or a contract actually is.
Their agreements?
They are the invisible boundaries and bridges that civilization creates to allow human beings to coexist without violence. A civilized person views a contract as a mutual agreement of trust.
Right.
A barbarian, however, views a contract purely as a mechanism. They either see it as a chain attempting to restrict their freedom, which they feel must be broken, or they see it as a trap they can use to bind and exploit the other person.
Oh, wow. It is an entirely parasitic worldview.
Complete.
The concept of a win-win scenario just doesn't exist in their psychology at all. For them to feel secure or victorious, the other party has to lose. They are entirely driven by a need to control.
And that psychological drive to control bleeds directly into how they behave during the actual argument. This is perhaps the most revealing diagnostic tool Yufeng offers.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The essay says that during a clash, it is the barbarian who acts unjustly and forcefully. They are the ones demanding, shouting, and just acting completely unyielding.
The loudest voice in the room.
Always. Conversely, the civilized party is defined by their ability to compromise and, most importantly, their capacity to self-reflect.
Let's really unpack the mechanics of self-reflection here, because it is the philosophical core of this entire framework.
Why does self-reflection equal civilization?
Because self-reflection requires a suspension of the ego. It requires the humility to step outside of your own desires for a second and ask, what is my role in this friction? Is it possible that my perspective is actually flawed?
And a barbarian is entirely incapable of that internal question.
Utterly incapable. Their overwhelming drive is to exert control over the external world and the other person. That drive creates a psychological blindness.
They literally can't see themselves.
They can't afford to look inward at their own flaws because that would require vulnerability. And in their zero-sum worldview, vulnerability is just weakness.
Wow.
So, lacking the tool of self-reflection, what is the only tool they have left to resolve a dispute?
Force.
Exactly. Force. They act forcefully, whether that's through physical aggression, verbal domination, or emotional manipulation. Because brute force is the only mechanism they understand for achieving control.
That reframes every argument I have ever witnessed.
It really does change things, doesn't it?
It does. You look at two people screaming at each other, and you usually try to listen to the words they are saying to figure out who is making the better point. But Shuifeng is arguing that the words don't matter at all.
The content is irrelevant.
The person who is absolutely unflinchingly convinced of their own righteousness, the person using sheer force of will to bulldoze the other, they are displaying the exact behavioral DNA of barbarism.
While the person who pauses, takes a breath, and attempts to see the dynamic from the outside, is demonstrating the DNA of civilization.
This brings up a really thorny logistical question, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
If a barbarian is defined by this inherently selfish, parasitic nature, if they are constantly breaking rules, taking advantage, and seeking to dominate everyone around them, how do massive organized conflicts ever happen? Right? Like, if a world is full of these self-serving predators, wouldn't they simply consume each other immediately? How does an army of barbarians ever even form?
It is a vital question, and Shuifeng addresses it directly in the final section of the excerpt. That text identifies a very specific catalyst that forces these chaotic entities into cooperation.
Right.
It is referred to as a special phenomena.
The temporary alliance. The text states that when two or more barbarians encounter a civilization, they will temporarily unite. They become allies specifically to confront and defeat the civilization. And strangely, during this period of alliance, there is a temporary peace between the barbarians themselves. They don't attack each other.
We have to look at the mechanics of parasitic cooperation here. Why do they suddenly stop fighting each other? Because the civilization represents an existential threat to their entire way of life.
It's a bigger target.
It is. The civilization has resources they want to extract, sure, but more importantly, it represents rules, boundaries, and stability, things they hate.
It really makes me think of two competing viruses inside a host body.
Oh, that's interesting.
Those viruses don't attack each other while the host's immune system is actively fighting them. The immune system is the civilization. It is the order trying to purge the chaos. So the viruses operate in a sort of unspoken tandem.
Right.
They don't help each other out of altruism. They just focus all their destructive energy on breaking down the host's defenses. They experience a temporary peace between themselves simply because Their violence is entirely directed outward at the common enemy.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. Their cooperation is purely pragmatic and entirely predatory. They unite because the civilization is simply too strong for one barbarian entity to consume all alone.
But what happens when the host dies? Like, what happens when the civilization is defeated or the common enemy simply disappears?
This raises an important question, and the text is definitive on this outcome. Once the external threat of the civilization is gone, the temporary balance is broken.
It shatters.
Suifeng states that mutual conflict will definitely occur between them again. There is no maybe,
The alliance shatters instantly.
because the underlying nature of the virus hasn't changed. Winning a war against a civilization doesn't magically instill a barbarian with the capacity for self-reflection.
Right, they don't suddenly learn how to compromise.
Exactly. Their behavioral checklist remains exactly the same. They still want to control, and they still want to take what belongs to someone else.
So without the civilization absorbing all of their violent energy, their predatory gaze naturally just sweeps the room and locks onto the closest available target, which is their former ally.
The illusion of peace evaporates. The treaty they signed with each other was never a bond of mutual respect. It was simply a weaponized pause.
A weaponized pause! Wow.
Once the pause is no longer strategically useful, they immediately revert to their baseline nature, and we arrive right back at the first tier of the diagnostic scale.
Barbarism versus barbarism, an extremely brutal conflict with no breaking mechanism, escalating until one just consumes the other.
It's inevitable.
It is a bleak, cyclical trap. Barbarism can only ever yield more barbarism. It cannot build a stable system. It can only consume what is already built and then consume itself.
Which is exactly why understanding this framework is so critical. It allows you to see through the grand narratives that groups or individuals use to justify their alliances.
The rhetoric doesn't matter.
None of it matters. When you stop listening to the stated reasons for a conflict and strictly observe the behavioral mechanics, who is breaking boundaries, who is refusing to compromise, who is incapable of self-reflection, the reality of the situation becomes starkly illuminated.
So what does this all mean for you? As we wrap up this deep dive, how do you take this translation from 2021 and actually apply it to your daily life?
That's the real test.
The mission we set at the top of the show was to rewire how you view conflict. If Shufeng is right, this framework isn't just some tool for analyzing history books or international news. It is a diagnostic tool for your own living room, your own workplace, and your own relationships.
It hits very close to home.
The next time you find yourself trapped in a recurring argument, you have to bypass the urge to endlessly debate the details of the issue. You have to look at the mechanics of your own behavior.
Are you acting forcefully?
Exactly. Are you demanding total capitulation? Are you entirely focused on how the other person is wrong? Or are you actively seeking compromise and searching for your own blind spots?
It demands an uncomfortable level of honesty from us. And it leads to a rather profound paradox that builds naturally on everything Yufeng outlines.
Oh, what's the paradox?
Well, think about it. If the absolute defining trait of a civilized person is the capacity for humility and self-reflection,
Okay.
and the defining trait of a barbarian is acting forcefully right, then what happens to you the exact moment you firmly convince yourself that you are the purely civilized one in an argument?
Oh, the moment you believe you have nothing left to reflect on.
Exactly. Does the sheer certainty of your own righteousness instantly strip away your self-reflection, transforming you in that very second into the barbarian?
That is a haunting realization to sit with. And it really implies that civilization isn't a permanent status you just achieve and keep. It is an active, ongoing practice of humility that you have to choose every single time friction occurs.
A daily practice.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it provided you with a new, uncompromising lens through which to view the world, and more importantly, a new lens to view your own conflicts. Keep questioning the mechanics of the arguments around you, keep practicing that self-reflection, and we will catch you on the next one.